Hey, everybody, welcome back to Illuminating Leadership, where we share the stories and experiences of industry and community leaders from around the globe. I'm your host, Beth Johnson, and I'm here today with my guest, Di Parker from Life After Loss. Welcome to our podcast, Di.
Hi, Beth. How you doing?
Hi. So, Di, as a grief and results coach, would you share a little of your journey with us, like how you arrived here and what impact your efforts are having on your clients and your community on the whole?
Yeah, absolutely. So pleased to have the opportunity, and thank you for that. I started coaching in 2004. Basis of my coaching is NLP. And then in 2016, I lost my husband. And the impact of that experience on me was like no other bereavement I'd experienced at that time. And the impact of that made me look at what I could then help other people with once I've got through this process as I believed it to be at that time. Anyway, I was using my coaching skills to try and help me through those dark days. And I thought, I've got to find something else here. There must be somebody out there that's going to be able to help guide me. And I started trying to look for this when I got told that my little sister was dying with cancer. And so I had to kind of put my life on hold to support her and her two children and the rest of my family. But a dear friend of mine found a grief course that we went and attended, which actually gave you some steps to help you in your healing, but teaches you also that grief is not a process. It's not going to start, middle, and end. Grief is an emotion, and we have those experiences of loss. We are grieving. How attached we are to that loss is to how much we grieve. So if you can understand that, because we are all unique, we all have different ways of looking at grief and our experiences. So if I'm with another widow, for example, she won't know how I feel and I don't know how she feels. But there's a common theme that people will say to you, oh, I know how you feel. Well, they don't. This is your unique experience. This was mine. She may have had a relationship from hell with her husband.
Right.
And therefore, her attachment to that loss is not as perhaps as hard for her as it would seem as possibly mine. So there's no comparison. She's having her own experience with whatever she's dealing with. And often too, there's a lot of Academy Award recovery, as we call it, I'm fine going on. And so all of those experiences that I went through personally, the whole teaching, I've now taken that and I've used it and I've added coaching because there was no element of coaching to that training. And so I can do both. I can help people through the steps that they will take. And then I help them when other things start to show up because they're unpicking an awful lot of other things of this unresolved grief that a lot of us carry, but don't realize. So that might be that you've moved house. You might be excited about the house you go into, but you're leaving friends, family, and memories in the last house. So you're trying to jolly yourself on because you're going to go in this new adventure in life, but wonder why when you get there, you're feeling quite sad. So we have all of these other things that go on in our lives. And of course, careers and things like that, the way you might be made redundant from one job. You're leaving your friends. You may have actually thought, something, that redundancy package is quite good. I'm going to be able to do things with it. But you're leaving all that support system and your colleagues behind. So there's always an element of loss with these things. And if you can identify that, then you can have another look at that.
But, I've known you now for 2 years or so, and you have been a great help to me in just our association and then some individual coaching to understand that grief shows up in all parts of our lives. It's not just loss of a person. And by the way, before I go any further, first I want to say how sorry I am that is part of what brought you here today, right? Is that process of grieving your husband and your sister. And it has prepared you for the work that you do. And I will say again, personally, what you do is valuable and so very helpful. Tell me a little bit more about the difference between taking a healing course and working with you as a coach to work those steps of the process. How does that look different? And why would you encourage someone to work one-on-one with you?
Good question. Sometimes the healing type courses, they kind of allow you that space to look back and go back there slowly and hopefully put in safeguards while you're doing it to make sure you don't go into a traumatic trauma response or anything. Whereas the course that I do, because I mean, I've done healing work before and I've used it in practice before I did this to help people when they brought a bereavement type situation to the door when they were struggling. So I can, everybody has their skill set and different way of doing it. And hopefully we all get to the same place, which is to empower the client. But what I found when I did this course, because I wanted the steps to help me heal. I had a pain in my heart that just would not shift. I couldn't Reiki it away. I couldn't do anything that I knew in the healing form to move it. And it was like somebody had just took a knife in my chest. Andrew and I had one of those relationships whereby we kind of knew each other and what we were thinking before we actually said it. And I often would have to say to him, did I say that out loud or was it one of those conversations in my head? And what that upset me more than anything is this felt like it was a block between me and him having that connection. Whatever your beliefs are, that's mine. Spiritual side of somebody is always around us and they live forever in my heart. So that was upsetting me more than anything. So when I went to this, I was actually wanting, just tell me what to do. I don't want to sit and talk about it anymore or share the story with other people. I was in a, that's, I'd done enough of that, but I wanted some steps to help me heal. And so on this program, the first 3 sessions that I do with somebody is basically to deconstruct some of the beliefs that we have around grief, the things that we've picked up from others, the myths that we've been told, like time's a healer. There is, that's not going to help. Imagine it. I mean, there's a great little visual in the book saying that if you have a puncture, do you sit outside of it and meditate? This will be repaired. The air will flow back into it. No, the steps you have to do. You have to take the tire off, get it fixed, and then you can pop it back on and you're on your journey. And your heart is no different. We have to take those steps to help us heal. It's action steps. So there's myths like that. When people tell you don't be sad, he's in a better place. No, he's not. Here with me is a better place. Right here with me. So those sort of things will just like red flag to anybody that is actually going through that grieving situation, especially in the early days. Understanding that people just want to comfort you. They want to try and say something that is going to lift you. The truth of it is nothing's going to. If you can just sit and listen to somebody, ask how they are feeling, not how are they, because you'll just get, I'm fine, when you can see quite clearly that they're not. But if you ask, how are you feeling? And give them the space to tell you. You do not need to fix the person, just allow them to have that space to talk. Because of course that tends to put people off. I mean, it happened to me. One person asked me, of all the ones that were around me, how I was feeling. And I thought, fantastic. I actually felt the joy of being able to say how I'm feeling. And I started to, and I got probably about maybe 2 minutes, and she changed the subject because obviously it was getting too much for her to listen to. You don't need to wear what the person's telling you. You don't need to take it on board. Just sit and listen with an open heart and just 2 ears and let them talk. Best gift. So we also look at things that will hold us back in life, like people's concepts of grief, guilt. Their concepts of guilt. That word is used in our language all over the place, when actually the true meaning of it is what you should feel if you have murdered somebody. To feel guilty, that's in the right context. But what we've had religious people take it on board and use it. Your mum and your dad, you eat your supper, or you're in, the starving children in Africa is usually the one that we used to get as kids. So we're taught guilt from the word go, and it's ingrained in us. And so if we understand that, when a client comes to me and says they're feeling guilty and they didn't get to say granny as much as they should have done, and now they know that, I'll ask them, what's the true feeling underneath? Now you know what that truly means. What's the true feeling underneath? And it'll be sadness. It'll be, anything will come up, sadness, fear, and then you've got something else you can help them with and help them through that.
That is such a deep, you dropped a lot of information there, right? So I'm listening to this thinking, the coaching that you do is beneficial to the person who's grieving, whether it's a person, a home, a situation, no matter what that is, that there's something underlying that grief that makes them feel that the severe emotions that they're feeling, right? Mm-hmm. And that we as a population just aren't really equipped to help others when they're going through that process. I think probably all of our listeners, I know all of our listeners have experienced some sort of grief. I can't speak to, severe, impactful human loss, but I learned that kind of early on, and I still struggle with it when I'm trying to help someone. That's our nature, is to try to help. But what I'm hearing from you is the help is not in fixing, helping, giving advice, giving platitudes, giving, the little statements that we've all been told ourselves, which just make me rankle almost. It's to ask that very impactful question and then let the person be, let them talk, let them experience. And like you said, don't take any of it on yourself.
Yeah. There's the phrases that you can say, which, I'm so sorry for your loss. Do you want to talk? Would you like to talk about it? I have no idea how you're feeling. Tell me, open up those conversations. Never say anything that's about yourself. Never say anything that is on one hand, you're trying to make them feel better, but it really doesn't. When they can rely, refer to somebody else that says, oh yes, well, that happened to so-and-so's, but look at their wife now, they're doing great. Because this is the next step we look at, is comparing. Yeah. Comparing losses. I kind of, talked a little bit about it earlier about the widow scenario, but that's exactly what we do. And that's ingrained in us again, from whether you've got siblings, whether you've got going to school, you're comparing, that person's, she's grown about another inch now. How's this one doing? And then they go to school. How did you do in your spellings? And you're, yes, I've done great. I've got another one this week. I've got 5 out of 10 in English. What about your friend Susie? How did she do? Instantly drop, because Susie, had 8 or 9. And you're being compared. So even if that person then tries to jolly you up again and says, no, it's fine. You did really well. You, in your heart, Susie, and it's been pointed out. So these things, we look at the way we compare in life and teach people to stop comparing.
So if you're the griever, it's actually quite normal to take that next step in your thinking and go, well, oh, wow, why haven't I healed as quickly? Why haven't I
Exactly.
come out of my shell? Why am I still raging? Why do I feel like curling up in a ball when so-and-so's, made it out?
Yeah.
And then the other thing I heard you say was, let's say you're the griever and I come up and say, oh, I know I experienced the same thing with my husband. And all of a sudden that makes it about me, doesn't it?
Yeah. Red rag to a bull, that one, because that they just don't, the comparing and the way that people try to make you feel better, it's a unique thing. It's your experience is unique to you. Like I said earlier, comparing yourself to somebody else is only doing a number on yourself. Somebody could be further down the road and they're getting on in life a lot better because you're comparing yourself to them. They may appear to be. People could look at me now, I'm in another relationship and say, oh, she's over him. That's another red flag. You never get over or move on from somebody that you've loved and lost. We learn to live with them in our hearts, then we understand and come to an accept that they're not physically with us anymore. But that doesn't mean to say that we can't, find a life, find a future for ourselves as well. And the thing that would hold a lot of people back is the guilt.
Well, talk to me a little bit more about that, about guilt.
Well, the guilt part in that is that I should not be doing this.
Oh.
I should be, I call it shouldn't all over yourself.
That's clever.
Well, it was taught to me by a coach many years ago. If you think about the word cows, right? I think I've talked to you about this before, haven't I? Could, ought, would, and shoulds spells cows. So if you catch yourself saying any of those, you can think about the cow. And you don't want to should all over yourself at all.
You do not.
So it's kind of, stopping that and understanding that you don't have to live like that. You don't have to live with that heaviness. The person that you've lost, if they love you, they don't want you to live like that. But you have to get to that place. You have to do the work and heal the pain of your loss before you can settle into knowing that. I think that's important. That is what I will agree is a process in that program.
Mm-hmm.
But grief itself is an emotion. Because further down the line, if you get triggered by something that comes across your path, I'll give you an example. I took my partner and his children out to do some camping a year ago. And I started to feel sad. And I thought, oh, I'm feeling sad. I'm grieving. What am I grieving? And then I realized what it was is that this is what I used to do with my family. My own boys have grown up now and they're getting on with their own life. As much as, we've got a lot of funny stories around it because Andrew was not a big fan of camping, but all those memories were coming up. And here I was kind of doing it again, slotted into another family. So this is what's different. When you know that, you can allow it. You can process it in that moment. Do I need to do some work on myself, or is it okay enough for me to let this go?
And that's what coaching helps you with, doesn't it? Because you had to identify, you could have gone the whole weekend feeling bad or sad or off and never identify for yourself, whoa, I'm feeling that way. What's going on here?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the skill and tools that people leave me with. So everybody who's does my course with me knows the tools, and if these things come up, they know how to help themselves through that memory or whatever that they're dealing with.
What does that, excuse me, what does that course look like? How long could they expect to work with you? Is it, dependent on each person's situation, or do you have a structured program?
It's a structured program, and it's 8 sessions. And the first 3 are the education part, the second 3 are the healing part, and then the last are for people who perhaps they've got other people they want to deal with, so they'll come back with that information on those sessions, or they've kind of put down the bags and the stress and emotions and other stuff that's come up, and they're like, what's next? What am I going to do now? And then sometimes they can panic a little bit and they go, find a life and do what you want to do. So they will then have that space to look at that. Now, if there's deeper work to be done, then I've got another package that takes us off into a couple of months' work. Because, you know, if somebody's been living with this deep-rooted grief for many, many years, they're going to probably need a lot more support than just the 6 sessions, 8 sessions rather.
Well, that's just it. You said it earlier, and I happen to know this as well. We've learned this over our own journey. We live today, and I'm in my 50s. So I live today with things that I learned or absorbed or chose as a safety technique for myself as early as, 4, 5, 6 years old. Right.
Yeah.
And when I finally understood that and understood that it impacts who I am, why I react the way I do, why I say the things I do, like that is very profound. And then you top that with grief, and it can immobilize you. And so how does one know that they're ready? And I ask that because, having experienced a severe grief myself, you do feel paralyzed. And even if someone is saying, I have tools and steps and procedures to help you, there's a point where you're not open to anything. You just need to cry and rage and scream. So what will they be feeling inside, or what have you experienced is the point that they finally say, oh, please help me out of this?
I just got to the point where I thought, I cannot keep living like this. I'm not functioning. And this was probably about 2 months after losing Andrew. Because I'm a coach, I could coach myself through the days that I wanted to shut myself up in the bathroom. I had to do that because the dog kept howling at me because it was only me and her. And I had that horrible deep darkness of depression I could feel coming in if I allowed it to slide down, keep going and keep sliding down. So I chose that I did not want to do that. I wanted to, I've got my boys were around me at the time. I had my dog, and I had to find a way of going forward. So I was ready. And that's the thing. It's about when you can't, that's the phrase, when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Perfect.
And you just I want something to help me with this now. And there's an awful lot of other work that I've done in the past. Me and my colleagues sat on that course, and we could relate to certain experiences that we'd had that we could see was relating back to a loss of some kind. And the most profound one for me was when I was working with children that had been removed from school, shall we call it that, rather than kicked out, because of their behaviour. And I set to and work with these ladies to they were teachers to help them. So I was supporting them, and I was using my NLP skills to reframe and get them to think outside the box, see perspectives, and start looking at all of these other complexities that make us feel and think and feel about things. And a lot of fun doing it. But I still felt like there was something missing. It just hit me like a light bulb. It was that they don't know how to deal with their losses in their life. Like I said earlier, we're taught how to gain things in life, but not what to do when we lose them. And so an opportunity has arisen with this partner of mine and his 2 children. And I've set about with them to create a course that I'm launching very soon to do that. I want to get this into schools. I want to get it available to any parent or teacher that wants to teach about this emotion, before there's an issue that they have to then deal with.
That's
And
fantastic,
I've had clients that have said, if I knew this stuff when I was a kid, I would have understood and made different life choices. I asked these two children, both independently, what is grief to you? That started at the beginning. I said on this course, what does grief mean to you? What's grief again? Both of them said that as their reply, and yet both of them have been through divorce, pet loss, pets leaving, moving, going to live with somebody else, changing schools, all of these things. There is an element of loss with all of those things, and so the little fella, he was more like Tasmanian Devil coming in. Do you remember the Tasmanian Devil?
Mm-hmm.
It's a cartoon. And I used to stand back and go, here he comes. And as we were doing this work, I could see him making those connections and dropping it and making sense of what he was feeling. And the best thing he said to me was, that I understand. And I'm like, what do you understand that says about you?
Right.
Let's write it down. And he said, why my mum thinks she's a bad person and she's not. Boom.
That's massive at that age. Imagine the impact that will have on him, on all of his interactions with others throughout the rest of his life.
Yeah, and he's really embraced it because he's had friends that have had losses since, and he's proudly come back and said he's been able to have conversations with them. And yeah.
Oh my gosh.
The daughter's a little bit more reluctant, I think, at the minute, because she's just got her own issues, ADHD, and trying to work things through with that. But she was insecure and she's not now.
Also.
Yeah, but that was all, again, the relationship her mum went to, the man never saw the children. And I explained that sometimes the mums say they can't. And in her case, she was worrying that if dad got a girlfriend, she would be left there. And I had to sit her down and I said, I'm so grateful that you opened up and said that. I said, your father would leave me before he would ever leave you. I said, and that's why I'm with him. And we did get to a point where I actually had to ask my partner to tell her the truth. I don't want to. I said, no, tell her the truth. She needs to hear it. So he said it, and she just leapt up then and went, but you're not going to, are you? But I said, it's opened up then for us to be able to have conversations going forward that possibly just may never have happened. So I'm really quite excited now to try and help other people, just like these children that I've been dealing with and the ones that are now living with me, my co-authors.
No kidding. They have taught you a lot. And isn't it, what I have found is that whether child or adult, when someone is responding to or acting in kind of a negative way, acting out, right? Like the kids you were talking about earlier. We weren't equipped with the tools to discern what was happening. So therefore we can't even figure it out, let alone help them through it. But if the one thing we all remember is that humans want to be happy and contributing and successful. And so when they're going through something, there's something much deeper behind it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, these children, there was one chap who'd actually thrown a chair across the classroom at a teacher. So I just sort of said, what did you do that for? And he said, she wasn't listening to me. He was struggling. He had severe dyslexia. It had never been picked up until he came and worked with these ladies, and then it was picked up and clear, so clear in everything that was coming up. So his response is, you're not listening to me, I'm going to throw something at you, so you will.
Right. And you discovered that in the course of one question with no judgment. There was no, labeling him as bad or out of control or unhelpable. There was why. Why did you do that? And then listening to his response.
Yeah.
Amazing. Just amazing. Do you mind if we switch just a second to entrepreneurship and your business on the whole? what's your governing philosophy in your business? What is the thing that you live by that you feel all entrepreneurs and business leaders should live by when running a business?
Authenticity.
Tell me why.
Because how you show up in the world is what empowers you and makes the difference. If you try and pretend to be something, or say, I mean, I admire the likes of Richard Branson and people like that, but there's no way it go, this is where the comparing thing comes in again, doesn't it?
It is.
And, yeah, I'd love to do this aspect of that one. Oh, and I'd love to do that. And actually, from all the coaching and everything else I've done, I've been stripping away all the shoulds and the way I should look to being, do you know something? You are enough. Show up who you are with your heart and be authentic. And that, even if you show up and you're having a bad day, say so. It's you're there. I mean, that the person that we like to listen to, AH, says, well, if you're feeling like that, go and have a power nap.
Right, and don't feel guilty about it.
Don't feel guilty about it, because you know what guilt means. So it's stripping away all of those things and taking the pressure off yourself, I think, helps you serve more deeply, because you're coming from a stronger place.
Well, I agree with that, because when you said it comes back to comparisons, and it does. We start to compare ourselves in our heads as that person's business is further ahead than mine. That leader in the corporate office has more respect from their employees than me. And what that does is put the focus back on you and all that you're doing wrong, versus embracing who you are, flaws and all, because I've never met a perfect person ever, no matter what they look like from the outside, and just go with that. And I too have found that when you start to just lay it all out on the table truthfully, and know that the world doesn't end, and that if you lose people, they were never meant to be in your space anyway, because you need to be you, and people respond to you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What success have you personally had in following that, or what lesson have you learned, in growing into yourself and being your authentic self while running your business?
I just show up as I am. I don't quite know how else to answer that one. But, I think it's helped me when I come to talk with clients to be, you stop thinking about what you should be doing.
All that shoulding on yourself again.
All that shoulding on yourself, or I need to do this with them, I need to do that with them. You can put all of that away, and then you can be fully present. So whereas a lot of coaching courses will tell you, you might need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do, and then you just know, actually, it's a person in front of me, not a process. So from what I do for people, it's just to sit, listen, and guide, and then work through whatever comes up for them.
That is true for leadership on the whole, right? So you're leading this process, you're leading this 8-week session and probably more with your clients, and your role is to coach, guide, help them through that process, right?
Yes. Yeah.
No different than any leader anywhere. Yeah. If you're struggling with an interaction with someone, a team member, a colleague, up or going up, with a boss or a vendor or a client, more than likely, you're not doing one of those things. You're not listening, you're not guiding, you're coaching. You're probably dictating or in your own head about you, or thinking about something completely unrelated to that conversation. And so is it fair to say, to share with leaders that
if you've got a team, Beth, you want to be able to be open to them So if there is an issue that's coming up, you're ahead of the game with it because you have that relationship. They don't have a fear that they're going to be judged, blamed, or shamed by you. And they could take responsibility for themselves and come and have that conversation with you.
I like what you just said about take responsibility for yourselves. And I'm going to tie that back to what you said earlier about the kids and your partner telling the truth to his child. I think we believe as a society that others can't handle the truth.
Yeah.
Or our truth.
That's the line of the movie. Can't handle the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
You could, that's right. I remember that.
And it's so true, right? I mean, what I have found is that when delivered, and my mantra is kind, calm, honest, right? So when a truth is delivered in a kind, respectful way, and I throw calm in there because I used to be the, I emoted with my hands and my whole body, and that does scare people. So in a calm way, and for Beth, that means sometimes sitting on my hands, and then honest and direct. Most people can handle that, including our kids. People just need to understand a why so that they can then move forward and be them and be their authentic selves, right?
Absolutely. You've just made me chuckle with that having to sit on your hands, because I'm that person too, Beth. My hands usually are like this, like
Yeah.
when I'm one-to-one with somebody. I mean, my hands have gone like this underneath here. So when we did the process that I was doing, they said, when you sit and listen to somebody, you have to sit, open, which we know from NLP, matching, mirroring, and keep your hands still. So I said to them, excuse me, I'm going to have to sit on my hands.
I'm pretty sure it was a therapist that told me that once when we were in a session with my husband. She's like, oh my goodness, just sit still, please. And it is effective, I will say. Ty, listen, if you could give your 18-year-old self one piece of advice, what would that be?
To do the grief course. Seriously. I can, there's things that happened to me in the office world that I started in, where people could be quite, bullying and nasty, and you take that on board, then that makes you feel guilty. Mm-hmm. So if I'd have known that, you would say that it was more about them than you, because that's what I help people through if they're struggling with that one. If anybody comes at you angry, it's never about you, it's about them. Something's been triggered in them and you're just the target. So Andrew used to do that quite a bit. And then I'd say, I can see that you're angry. Come back to me when you're finished and we'll have a chat.
Perfect.
But that's for sure is, to just go and do this course, and then you'll have the tools for the things that we're going to have. 42 losses, I reckon we'll have in our lifetime before we die.
42, is that what you said?
42. Wouldn't you think it would be useful to know how to manage these things in life?
My goodness, Di. Okay, so listen, I've never heard that. And that it immediately sent a little shiver down my spine to say, if I'm to expect 40, and I'm assuming that's significant, right? That isn't just, I'm on a diet and the loss of something. That is the home, the friends, the pets,
Well, let's look at that one. Loss, on a diet, loss of self-esteem. Are you going to tell me that's not a loss?
That totally is a loss.
Totally is a loss. So this is where we unpick. There's an awful lot of other things underneath what's going on with that people might just throw away because they think, like an alcoholic, for example, they're trying to heal a pain of some kind of loss with the alcohol. That's just, that could have easily been me, Beth. I don't drink that much. I used to have a glass at the weekend because he wasn't allowed any, but when I went away and the family came over, we were out having a meal every night. So a couple of glasses of wine. That continued when I got home because this stuff used to make me feel better. That Saturday evening cuddle with your glass of red. And it started, and I'm like, this stuff used to make me feel better. I'm still giving it, giving it a go. I'm not going to, anyway. it was one Saturday night, about 3 weeks in. I was feeling awful, but I put something on the telly, because obviously you feel awful because you think, well, this is because I've lost him, but physically I felt awful. And it was almost like it was just brought into my awareness that I'd actually just gone unconsciously and taken a second bottle of wine out of the cupboard and just poured myself a drink.
Wow.
And I went, oh my God, what am I doing? So I always get them with a cap anyway. So I put the cap back on and I put it in the cupboard and I said, I am not drinking again unless my friends are with me. And that's how I stopped that right there and then.
And if you had not had that self-awareness, you could have continued on and found yourself in an even darker place.
You start to learn that you're self-medicating yourself.
Right.
So whereas that started off as what we call a short-term energy relieving behavior, all the things that we do to try and comfort ourselves, that could have ended up being a long-term problem. So again, it's about just identifying the pain. I mean, my daughter-in-law's father is a recovered alcoholic, and when he came back to working with the pain of his loss of his mum and the relationship. She was still alive because he was able to do some work around it, but it was the loss of the kind of love that he was looking from his mum that wasn't there.
That is profound, and it leads me back to one of my previous interviews with my father-in-law, actually, who's been dry, for 42 years. And as I met my husband and I went through this process with them, I'd go to Al-Anon meetings and AA meetings. And the one thing I heard that has always stuck with me, and I think kind of tied into the work that you do and what I do, is there was a recurring theme of I drank to fill a hole in my gut. And that hole in your gut is, insert word here, loss, guilt, well, like you say, a loss of something, a loss of love, a loss of, yeah. Wow.
So, I mean, you can have somebody that's been abused or something like that. It's a loss of trust. Those people shouldn't do that.
Right.
So therefore, there's a big impact on that. And then sometimes people will hold that in on themselves. So that then becomes compounded and becomes an unresolved grief that's now sort of saying, has an influence rather on our lives, on our decisions that we're going to make. Stopping yourself from having a wonderful relationship with somebody because you've had that issue.
Right.
And that's
I continue to learn every single time we talk. You are an amazing, amazing woman and coach, and the things that you have experienced in your life have led you to a point where you're going to help so many, and I just know it. One last question, because this comes up a lot in a workplace environment, and that's that all elusive work-life balance, right? We're all seeking it, and then there's a lot of CEOs that say it's bunk, which I have something to say about that. What do you do, Di, to balance the heavy work that you do? Because I imagine there's a lot of emotion that comes into play when you're with people. And, we're trained how not to take that on ourselves, yet you care and you put your own heart on the table. How do you balance your career and your life?
Boundaries.
Tell me a little bit about that.
So if I'm with a client and they are offloading, I'm just fully present. It doesn't mean to say I have to wear what they're telling me. So I teach my clients, when we get further on in our coaching together, about how they can protect their own heart from different things that go on in life. So it was taught to me, funnily enough, by a medium years ago. You can either put a cape on, so your head's out and you're listening, and if you can help somebody, you can, and if not, put them in the direction to somebody that will, but you are protecting your heart. So you can put your imaginary cape on, but if it's going to be a bigger issue, you put yourself in a bubble. So it's a bubble of love. So you're not cutting yourself off. You're open to what happens, but they're not penetrating your heart. And in all honesty, there's been two chaps that two young men that got to me, and that's because they'd experienced both parents die, and they were they were just a bit younger than my own sons. So that got to me. So I did my work, and then I went up to my eldest son and I said, I want a hug. I don't need to talk about it. I just want the hug. Okay, Mum. They used to me now. And so I just got my hug because my partner Rob wasn't in my life then. So that's just another way of me doing it, because, for me, that was what I needed, because I felt for my sons. If I died, because I was starting to compare. Mm-hmm. In that emotion, I was starting to compare. So I picked that up, but I just needed to get a hug.
Well, and there again, you were authentic and told your truth, like we talked about earlier. You didn't hide from it and look at your sons and go, they'll think I'm crazy. They don't understand. They don't need my negativity. You said simply, I need a hug.
Yeah.
And you got your hug.
I need my oxytocin. Give me one.
Right?
Give me that shot.
You have the greatest analogies, and I want to leave our listeners with one that, as you were talking about your own boundaries of how to protect yourself, if you're in any scenario, whether it's work or personal, and you want to help, but you're afraid of asking that question that we went back to early on, which is, how are you feeling? Put on that cape, right? Put on that, I was picturing, put on that coat and leave your head in the conversation, but don't wear their emotions. Don't wear what they give you and carry that out of the room with you.
If you get into their stuff with them, then you're going to be no good to them.
Right.
And so that's came back from when I very first started to coach, and somebody had come with a miscarriage issue, and I've had a few of them, and I could literally feel it pulling from my solar plexus to this woman, and I thought, oh, so I noticed what it was and I stopped it, and I did a bit of a movement in the chair to kind of break state, so I could be fully present for her and not go into my own grief about that situation right there and then. But we are all connected. So I think if you notice it, you can catch it. It's being, know yourself and know how you are with these things. And you don't really know that until you've had an experience, I think, of that. And to remind yourself, you are only human. Do not say to yourself, I should have. I should have done it a bit differently or whatever. Because some perfectionists will always want to do more and do things better. But if the person that you've been with completely, you've served them, they don't know what other things that you've got in your toolbox to help them at that point. Right. Hopefully they'll find out if they continue working with you. But, you just, lead and pace is the big thing for me too, because you get somebody and you think, oh, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. I mean, overload, and then they're running out the door. So yeah, that was one of my biggest lessons, is like, oh, there's so much stuff we can do, and get rid of this shit you're carrying.
It gets I know it gets exciting, doesn't it? You do have to kind of go slowly and at that person's pace, and we're both here to encourage you. That's what a good coach will do for you. Di, I cannot thank you enough for taking your time with us today and sharing of your story and your experiences and how that has shaped and groomed you into the amazing human being and coach that you are today.
Oh, bless
and
you.
Absolutely, folks. I just want to say thanks again for tuning in, and in the wise words of Di Parker, let go of that guilt. Let go of the comparisons, and for crying out loud, quit shitting on yourself. You guys, thanks again. I hope you'll join us on the next episode of Illuminating Leadership. Until then, bye. that's just a little after show follow-up for anyone who's interested in working with Di and busting through life's challenges. Go to lifeafterlossiom.com. That's Life After Loss, I as in India, O as in Oscar, M as in Mary.com. Thanks again. We'll see you on the next show.